Alright, welcome to the Stepping Stones video on price elasticity of demand in the economics section of IGCSE. So let's start with what price elasticity of demand is. Well, price elasticity of demand, as mentioned here, is the percentage change in quantity demanded upon the percentage change in. That's right. So we want to calculate what percentage in change of quantity demanded will reflect on the change in price. Therefore, it is really important to calculate price elasticity of demand, especially if you are a business and you want to figure out how are your products going to be sold, whether there's going to be a drastic change if you as a business change the price or not. And it also shows how the value of your product as a business, how the value of your product plays simply. Because if you have a commodity like rice, which is pretty relatively elastic, since relatively inelastic, since it's a commodity and it's a necessity for the daily lives of most of us, we will not, a small change in price would not cause that big of a change in demand. However, if we have luxury goods like holidays, vacations, going to visit your aunt or uncle on Christmas on a flight, going to visit your aunt and uncle generally, you will definitely look for when prices will reduce down and then make that decision. So if the price reduces, then there will be an excess demand because there are more people willing to buy that product or use that product at a lesser price. So let's first draw our demand curve, starting with the line. Let's label that D. D, we'll make that 14. Let's place that D. And let's have our price at 14 and quantity. It's a bit repetitive here. Let's mark that 0. Sorry, 0. And let's basically draw a line where at a certain price that will be the quantity. So let's make a connection to both the axes here. And apologies. Yeah, let's get that straight. Yeah, okay, here we go. So at that point on the curve, on the demand curve, we have a price, we have a certain set of units being produced at Q quantities being sold at P prices. Is that correct? But what if we change the price and we go up the price, we go up, let's say, to this point in the graph. This point is clearly at this point. So what if we change the price of the product? Let's say we're selling, I don't know, let's say rice. Let's write as a demand curve for rice. So this is the demand curve for rice, and if we increase the price of rice from P to P1, it will have an inverse, and it will have a reduced impact where the quantity of units will be dropped from Q to Q1 as per the diagram. Therefore, from Q to Q1. And basically what PD measures the ratio. It measures the ratio between the price, the change, the percentage of the delta in the prices, and the percentage of the over the percent. My apologies. Let me say that again. Price elasticity of demand measures the percentage change in the delta in the quantity sold upon the percentage changed in price. Therefore, so we're just trying to figure out what is the ratio or the elasticity basically of that curve when you change the price from P to P1 or from wherever to wherever, and we basically want to see the impact that that creates on the impact that that creates for the demand of that product. So let's go down and show and draw a PED diagram with real numbers this time. Let's draw a better diagram this time. All right. So we have our diagram here. Sorry, this is just takes a bit of time getting used to, but here we are. Okay, so let's say this is the PED diagram, the demand diagram for, let's think of an important commodity in today's markets. Let's just take the example of wheat. Wheat is a really important commodity, and wheat is a pretty important commodity. Okay, and let's say and because wheat is such an important commodity, it's going to have a relatively inelastic demand because a small change in price, because a large change in price will cause a really minor change in demand, because we all need wheat. We cannot survive without wheat. Wheat is pretty much the essential staple diet of most Indians. So without wheat, our diets or meals would be incomplete. Therefore, it is necessary for us. Therefore, the demand for wheat becomes very inelastic, where we have a big change in price causing a small change in the quantity demanded. Let's finish this diagram properly. So we have price, we have quantity, and we can label, let's take P as the lower price. Okay, let's take P. That will give us Q units, and P1 and Q1. So you can notice in this diagram that as this space increases, if this space increases larger than this space, you're basically having an inelastic demand. And because as I mentioned, a large change in price should not cause that significant of a shift in demand. Now let's draw another demand diagram to show what an elastic supply curve looks like. So we have our two demand curves. Let's draw that again. Oh, come on. Whatever. So yeah, we'll just manage. We have the two demand curves. Let's label them price and quantity, and let's have our let's have our 0, and let's draw our demand curve. Now, an elastic demand curve is a lot less steep, basically the opposite of what an inelastic demand curve would look like, pretty self-explanatory. Therefore, we have a much shallower, less steeper curve. Let's make our axes. So let's say that and that. So, and let's label And these two lines create our quantity. These two lines create our quantity. So let's fill these things in. This time let's take the higher value as P, the higher price. So P, let's take P1. Let's take this as Q. Q1. And you can easily, and let's say this is the demand for luxury cars, because luxury cars are not a need, they're a want. They're basically things that you desire but you do not need for survival. They're not necessities, unlike wheat, which we mentioned here is a necessity for most of our diets in India. So let's look at the demand for luxury cars here. And you can notice that a small change in the price of the product from P to P1, look how tiny this gap is, it can barely fit my cursor over here, will cause this big of a change in demand, which clearly shows that your demand is likely to increase if you lower your price by P1 units. Your space here increases significantly. So there's a simple conclusion here. If the distance between your price is larger, then you have an inelastic demand, like here, where this space gets smaller. If your space is smaller, then your demand, the actual quantity or units sold, becomes larger. And this is basically comes back again to the simple law of demand. Whereas as the price decreases, the demand increases, and as the demand increases, the demand decreases, the price increases. So basically you have two different demand curves, one showing the inelastic demand for products which are more like commodities and necessities for daily life, and the second one showing the demand for luxury cars, or more goods which are wants, basically, which are considered wants in the IGCSE economics course, which are like goods which we do not need for extreme survival.